everyone, this is Amy from the North Columbus Public Library, and thank you so much for joining me today. We are going to be learning Cribbage 101, and we have a special guest speaker. Before I introduce her, though, I wanted to encourage you to check out some books that are related on Cribbage and many other games as well. We have here Hoyle's Rules of Games, and you can request this for a curbside pickup, and it's very good. This one is especially detailed on teaching you how to learn cribbage. We also have another book available for checkout, and it is the Complete Book of Card Games. And this one also covers many different types of games as well, including cribbage. So please feel free to check these out, and you'll see that there's several in the library's catalogs that you can request for curbside pickup. So we have a special guest speaker today. Her name is Glenda, and she's originally from the UK and also from Massachusetts. There she actually was part of a local cribbage group, and she learned how to play cribbage from her father from around the age of 10 or 11, who was in the Merchant Navy. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Glenda, and she's going to teach us how to play cribbage. Thank you, Glenda.
Hi, Amy. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me. So first of all, a little bit about the history of cribbage. It's obviously a card game. So there's the short, unromantic history, and then there's a slightly more interesting history, which I think is the one I actually prefer. So some people say it originated in Great Britain about 200 years ago, and then there's the sort of mythological version, which I don't think we really know is true, but that it was, in fact, it was created by an Englishman called Sir John Suckling, who lived from 1609 to 1642. So that would put it a lot older, at more than 400 years. And apparently it was originally known by the name Noddy, Noddy, which is interesting because Noddy was a key character in a children's series that I read a lot as a child, and by Enid Blyton. She wrote a whole series of stories involving a character called Noddy. Of course, they're considered to be politically incorrect these days, so we won't talk about them too much, but I thought it was kind of interesting that I didn't know that cribbage was originally called Noddy, but that's apparently what it was called. So Sir John was very wealthy. He inherited a small fortune when he was 18 years old, so he went on traveling, and that really widened his horizons. So he was actually regarded as one of the foremost card players of his time. In 1630, he was knighted by the king, but of course, as what was wont to happen in those days, he fell from grace several years later, and so he had to leave the country because he was actually involved in a conspiracy to try and save a friend who was jailed in the Tower of London. So you can see why this is a more interesting version. So the plan unfortunately failed, just like many plans of that ilk did in England, and so he had to flee England, and he was so sad to leave his country that he actually took his own life at the age of 33. But cribbage is considered to be his legacy. So that's the long and the short version. So in other words, we don't really know how old it is or who really founded it, but that's like a lot of other things as well. So just a quick overview. Cribbage is typically played with two people, but it can also be played by groups of 3 and 4. So what you need is a standard deck of playing cards without the joker, jokers, and a cribbage board. And there are a number of different types of cribbage boards out there. I happen to have this one here, which is rather large, so it doesn't quite fit in the screen, but you can see there are pegs and a lot of holes, and this is just used for scoring. So you move the pegs around as points are scored, and the first person to reach 121 points wins the game. Now, there are a couple of funny things about this. If your opponent has only scored 90 points or less when you reach 121, this is referred to as being skunked. Yes, like the black and white animal that you see on the roadside. And if the opponent has scored 60 points or less, that's the ultimate defeat, and that's called double skunked. So a couple of things interesting about the board. And the one I have here actually has the letters S and SS marked on it for skunked and double skunked. And somebody obviously was very clever. You can see a couple of other cribbage board types here. So there's some very ornate ones, and somebody also made one in the shape of a skunk. And then there's the one that just goes round in the loop. The one I showed you just now goes sort of up and down, so you have to move the pegs over to another lane. So for simplicity, for Cribbage 101, we'll just focus on the two-player scenario because I only have two hands and it would be difficult for me to play four people at the same time. So what happens is you take the deck of cards and you both just cut the deck to see who has the lower card. And so this person on the right would have the lower card because the picture cards score higher in cribbage as they do in most games. And so that person would be the dealer. So the dealer would deal 6 cards to each player. And I've set up a couple of hands here so that I can just demonstrate sort of the rudimentary aspects of the game. So the object of the game is to accumulate points. And there are 3 phases to the game. There's the discard phase, then there's scoring your hand, and then there's something called the crib, and I'll explain those in a bit more detail in a minute. And there are also 2 very important numbers to remember, 15 and 31. So each player would inspect their cards and select 2 out of the 6 to put into what is called the dealer's crib. It's also known as the box. So I have 2 hands here, and I'll show you the first of them. So hopefully you can see here, there's a king, 9, 2 8s, a 7, and a 3 on the end. So with bearing in mind the thought about, 15s, you can also score from runs or multiples. This one is a very clear hand as to which 2 cards you would want to discard, and those would be the king and the 3, because if we take the king and the 3 out of here, we have a 9, 2 8s, and a 7. And so you can make 15s out of the 8s and the 7s, which scores 2 points for each of those. You also have a pair of 8s, and then you have 2 runs of 3, 7, 8, 9, and 7, 8, 9. So we would discard the king and the 3 into the dealer's crib and hold those. In this other hand, we have a king, jack, 6, 5, 4, and a 2. And again, this one is relatively easy as well, although there are some options here. But the best thing to do here would be to retain the king and discard. Retain the king, the 6, the 5, and the 4, and discard the jack and the 2. So let's do that. And the reason for doing that is that you can score 15. Oops, sorry. It's the wrong card. Start doing things in reverse. So we discarded the king and the 2, and we kept the 6, 5, 4, and the jack. So the reason for this is you can score 15 from the 6, the 5, and the 4. It doesn't have to be with 2 cards. Or you can score 15 from the jack and the 5, and you also have a run of 3. So that's the second player's hand. So the person who is not the dealer cuts the deck again, and the dealer turns up the top card, which also comes into play. So in this case, it's a 3. So we'll just put that to one side. And then in the discard phase, you take those 2 hands, and then people play play the cards. So player one, for instance, could lay down the 9, and then the second player would play the 6, because that would be 15, and you would score 2 points from that. And then you keep laying down cards until you get as close to the number 31 as possible. If you actually get to 31 exactly, you score 2 points. If you get to 29 or 30 or some other number that's not 31, then you only score 1 point. So you keep playing until all the cards have been laid down, and then you go into the second phase of the game, which is to score each of the players' hands. So this player with the 9, the 2 8s, and the 7s will be very happy, because you score so 15 for 2 from the 8 and the 7, 15 for 2 from the other 8 and the 7, and then so that's 4 points total for the 2 15s, a pair for another 2, so that would be 6 points, and then 2 runs of 3, which would be another 6 points, so that would be 12 points altogether. So that's a decent hand, but you can score as high as 29. So, you know, 29 is a very rare score, but it is known to happen. So they would do very well out of that hand, and then the player with this hand would score 15 for 2 points from the 6, the 5, and the 4, another 2 points from the Jack and the 5, which would be 4 points, and then a run of 3, which would be 7. So the other person obviously scored 12, so they would be a little bit ahead. You would also include the 3, that was the card that was cut by the dealer. That also comes into play. So in actual case, this hand, you would get an extra point here, because you would have a run of 4. So you'd have 3, 4, 5, 6. So you'd actually get an extra point by using the cut card there. So that's the second area where you get to score points. And then you look at the crib, and so you have these 4 cards in the crib, and you also have this 3 from the cut card. So this is actually a really good crib, because you would score 15 for 2 points for a 2, a 3, and a king. So you actually have 4 of those. So that'd be 8 points, and then you have a pair of 3s, which would be 10 points total, and then you also have a pair of kings, which would be 12 points total. So that's a very good crib score. And that's the end of the first round, and you keep doing that, and you move your pegs forward as you score points, and you keep doing that until somebody gets to 121 and gets all round the cribbage board. So that's Cribbage 101. And if you want to try playing and you take out the books from the library and you read it, and you have an iPhone or another type of phone, of course there are lots of apps for playing cribbage. So you can download you know, any of the apps for your phone and try playing against your phone. And there are different levels you can set. The app I use is Cribbage Pro, but there are lots of others as well.
Awesome, thank you. That was a wonderful tutorial, and I had no idea all the different things about cribbage. Would you say that it's comparable to any other game out there, or a combination of different types of games, do you think? Or influence?
I don't know that there's anything quite similar to it, but you know, it's about the same level of complexity, you know, when played on a you know, a fairly sort of simple amateur level. I mean, there are people out there that do this very, very seriously, and I don't know how they do it. There's a lot of strategy that I'm not super familiar with myself, but you know, for a sort of fun evening, you know, if you ever wanted to do a cribbage league at the library, I think you can pick up the basics of it fairly quickly. And when you play in fours, you play with a partner. So you sit around a square table, and instead of people getting 6 cards, they would get 5. And then each person would put 1 card into the crib instead of 2. So you still end up with 4 cards in the crib, but then each person scores their hands separately, and of course you're laying down cards. You don't know quite what your partner is going to do, so you can sometimes sort of develop some telepathy with them, but you're never quite sure what your partner is going to play either. And you can score many ways in the discard phase of the game as well. So you can score by making 15s. You can score by, laying down the card that gets you to a total score of 31. You can also sometimes make runs in that discard round, and you would score a point for each card in the run, and you can score multiples as well. So if somebody puts down an 8 and you put down an 8, you would get 2 for a pair. And there are a lot of other subtleties as well, but we won't get into that today.
Well, it sounds fascinating. I know that I've played spades, sometimes hearts, and I really enjoyed the aspect of when you are playing spades, you do have that partner aspect, and like you mentioned, the kind of communicating without communicating.
Exactly, yes.
So,
but it's fun.
That's wonderful.
We've sort of gotten away from the age of people playing games, and I wonder if sort of the current times are maybe pushing us back in that direction a little bit. If you have people that you live with, playing games is one way to probably get through this current phase of life.
Excellent point. I couldn't agree more. Yes, especially like family game nights and things of that nature that bring people more together. When you can't really get with your neighbors and your friends like you want to.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, and I thank you so much, Glenda, and I encourage everyone to, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comment section below, and we'll find an answer for you. And also feel free to share what your favorite card game is, and be sure to try out Cribbage. And if you are interested, and once, of course, things get a little bit better, and starting a Cribbage playing card group, then let us know. And we always are open to hearing more ideas. And again, we couldn't thank you, Glenda, for sharing us how to play Cribbage.
It's a pleasure, Amy. It was nice to chat with you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Inspirational.
Exceptional.
High tech.
Organizing.
Huh? Oh.
Reading it. Warm and fuzzy.
Suspenseful.
Reading is musical.
Out of this world.
Reading is everything.
The Summer Reading Challenge.
We're open. Check us out.